Welcome to the Artistic Perspective, everybody, for Where We Stand. And we are joined today by Donnetta Lavinia Grays, who is the playwright of this fantastic piece. My name is Anita, and I'm the Executive and Artistic Director of Portland Stage. And today, apart from Donnetta, I'm also joined by Macy Downs, who was the assistant director working with Kevin Arfrey, who was the director of the play. And in a moment, Todd Brian Backus, who is our literary manager, will be joining us. But just a few short things for those of you who haven't seen Where We Stand. You still have 2 more weeks during which you can catch the streaming version on demand. And I know Donnetta saw that just the other night, so I'm looking forward to her thoughts on some of that too as we go. And we'll try not to do any spoilers. I'm not sure that there are tremendous spoilers. Also, we are starting to launch our next season. So you can head to portlandstage.org to keep up to date with everything that is that we are planning. I think in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be putting out what the season should be. With that, if you have questions, you can drop them either in the chat or in the Q&A, we'll try to keep an eye on both of those 2 spots and try to ask and answer the questions as they come up. So Todd, are you back with us, functional? Nope, he's not. So Donnetta, I'm going to start out with a quick question. I really want to know what you thought of things, but I would love to ask what inspired you to write this play to get us all started on the same page.
Absolutely. Well, first, can I just say a big, huge thank you to you, Anita, and to everyone at Portland Stage, because I have such a tremendous amount of love being an artist who's worked there before and whose work has been supported there before. And for you all to have embraced this particular play, especially at this moment in time, really means so much to me. I think I've articulated that to you, but I just want to make sure that that's publicly known. What inspired this play? Well, back in, was it 2017, I was a cast member of a production of Twelfth Night as part of the mobile unit with the Public Theater. And the mobile unit takes sort of scaled down versions of Shakespeare's plays, and we travel throughout the city, all 5 boroughs, to communities that have little access to the theater. And when I say access, that's not simply financial. It's about mobility. It's about that feeling that the theater may not even be for you. So who do you know? Like, is this sort of institution a thing for me? Is it meant for me? But also, we would go to homeless shelters, women's shelters, schools, and we would go to incarcerated communities as well, where we would visit those communities at every security level. And I got had the honor of playing Feste in that show. And the thing about the mobile unit, there is no hierarchy of the space. We're in the round, or in a square, actually. We put down a carpet that's like designed for each specific show, and we have audience on either side, and the actors commune with the audience top of the show. So there's no distance, and the show kind of begins when you're in that space. And so I was also at the same time a lab member at WP. So I was busy. That year. As a playwright, I was a lab member, and Stephanie Ibarra, who's now the artistic director at Baltimore Center Stage, was then running the WP Producers Lab, and sort of, as well as being the head of the mobile unit. So she kind of she's like, wait a minute, you can do the acting and you can do the writing. So let's see if you can do them all at one time. Um, and commissioned me to write something specific for the mobile unit. And that's where we stand kind of came from. And I was inspired by the audiences themselves, especially those in those incarcerated communities. And I was thinking about, what if I placed them center stage? What would it be? What would it mean for someone to stand in the center of town and create a memory of belonging to this particular town, and had at a time been set aside, cast aside? And what does it mean to ask for mercy inside of that space? So that was the inspiration. And also because those communities were used to heightened language, so I didn't want to deviate from that. And I wanted to stay in communion with those audiences as well. So that's the long version of inspiration.
So, and Donnetta, have you gotten to perform the play for those communities?
It's been such a strange journey for this play. It's been such a strange journey. So we did the premiere at WP, and that was also in this proscenium space that just could not be oriented in the way that we needed it to be. So what we did was, I would go into the audience, up and down the aisles, and it was during the time when we could touch, and so I would sit inside the audience and be with them as a point of connection. As part of the co-production of that world premiere, we had set up a tour with Baltimore Center Stage. We were going to go into the communities and do that similar thing as with the mobile unit, and then also have the show on the round and in the space. What had happened was COVID, and the tour was the first thing that got nixed. All of the uh, those incarcerated communities, those unhoused communities, things like that. We were going to perform in schools. All of that shut down immediately. So I haven't had a chance to go in and tour those communities yet. So I haven't quite seen or felt the play in the place where I've imagined it yet. But there's time. There's still time, and the world is healing. So.
So, I know with the video, we're in a proscenium. We're in sort of a standard white American proscenium theater space,
Mhm.
and trying to take this piece that was clearly grew out of another desire to reach people in a way, and yet here we are trying to reach an audience. And um, what is that? What do you see? How does that work? Did that work for you? Did it
Yeah.
not work for you? Especially now we've added the layer of a video on top of it. Not only are you not in the space, and Tracy Conyers Lee couldn't be out in the audience at all, and the audience had to be wearing masks and had to be socially
Yeah.
distanced.
Well, here's what you got going for you. You got Tracy, who is a brilliant performer. So I would imagine, and from what I saw, is that I felt deeply connected to her. And I think uh, what I was excited about is that the language still read. It didn't feel. And I don't know. Maybe I'm sitting inside of a place of profound privilege, because I know what the language is. But the way that she and Kevin, of course, created a world that felt unique to that space. And I think that's the thing, right? It's like, we are where we are, which is what it says in the stage directions. We are where we are. You can't shy away from that. And to make that space one of social discourse, of how do we live in this space together? What does that mean? I think that was achieved for sure. It's tricky because we are in this video time, and I've for the production at Baltimore Center Stage, I had to record it myself as well. So it's always like, how do we connect with what I was excited about is that there were bodies in space. There were actual people there, and I could feel at the vote, or excuse me, or what happens at the end, the same sort of emotional thrill that I got. Um, it was still quite emotional. Um, yeah, I was taken with it.
So, and I think when you speak about the audience that you're creating it for and them being in the round and them being people that aren't necessarily, they haven't been trained to be an audience member in the way that we as especially a white upper class audience, you know, you come into the theater, you
Mhm.
the usher brings you to your seat, you sit there when the lights go down, you see a play and you respond, at times in ways that seem respectful of the
Yes.
most of the time respectful of whatever's going on up there. And at the end, the lights come up big and there's this giant curtain call thing that happens where the people who act come out,
Yeah.
you bow, and you get to say bravo. And this play sort of breaks all of those established norms. So can you
Yeah.
speak a little bit to, I know you were creating it for a different audience, but the impact that you see or feel from that with an audience that is more used to sort of traditional, this is what theater is.
Yeah, I there's a lot of mileage and even mild discomfort in the theater. You know, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this is taking me out of my comfort zone here. There's something that's going to be expected of me. I think that that is the grander sort of participation in the thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to have to adjust myself and pay attention in a different way. So that uh, changes the audience in a certain way. And I think, you know, I've the play was developed in part at New Harmony in Indiana. That was a mostly white audience, yeah. For and I think though, what what is what people have to do when the audiences are with that demographic is you have to come in, and I think this is true for just about any audience, but more specifically when you have a Black body on stage and who is asking about why they are not, why they are on the periphery of a community as opposed to inside of it. You are bringing uh, whatever biases, whatever, I think people want to be good. People instinctively want to be good. And I think that what we've created is a play that has a little bit of mess to it. So you have to check what all of those biases are in space. You know, I've been in a lot of communities as an artist, as I've traveled all over the country, and it's one thing to sort of have a philosophy of progressiveness, but if you don't have to practice it, once it's like I understand the ideas of a thing, but like when it's here, when it's present, who am I in that space when it's right here? So that I think is the question in those sorts of communities. I think it's different. We had an audience of folks from the community, just from homeless shelters and women's groups and things like that, who came in to our performance. We had a free performance one day at WP. They understood the play in a very, very different way, in a very, very, very different way. And the conversations that were born out of that came from the perspective of the man and understanding exactly what his concerns were. Right. So it's a play that is meant to be to evolve sensibilities. you know i don't I don't answer anything, right? The answer comes from this community that's built immediately. I don't, but of course, like I think that's a lot of the work that I do as a writer anyway. I'm like, frankly, I don't understand playwrights who position themselves as experts. I am kind of dumb about a lot of things, which makes me wildly curious. So I'm curious about something. So I ask a question inside of this particular play, and I think that the community is the grand, not necessarily performance, but the grand sort of uh, the impact, the answer, in and of itself.
Yeah, I think you ask a whole slew of questions. Yeah, I mean, you really make us think about so many different ways that we experience the world and tradition and history and what matters and what doesn't matter. And there's a question in the Q&A from Ellie. Why did the main character, well, they're saying have to be identified as a man rather than simply a person or gender neutral?
Well, if you read the text of the play, I think about man as every man. So I say, and so I leave it to uh, uh, the creative team to form that person how they wish. I it's for me when we did it at WP, I performed it, and so did Dave and Ryan Smith. So you had different reactions to a man on stage and a woman on stage, right? I'm a queer woman, so the pronouns didn't change when talking about the forever lover. It was she, because that's my experience, and I'm just like I put that man on as myself, and that's what you come to the space. And so I don't necessarily think of it as a gendered role, but I think that what is undeniable is when a performer uh, feels in the body of the quote unquote man, you're going to have a reaction given whatever body is on stage. I know that there was a reading of it in Indianapolis where they changed it to woman, and I'm like, that's fine by me. It's about how that community receives uh, that citizen. Yeah.
Macy, I'm going to let you see if you have a question that you'd like to ask.
Um, I'm actually curious also about um, what are the ways that this play, I remember when we talked earlier, you talked a lot about like, oh, this play for you came out of like Southern storytelling in South Carolina. And I'm curious about like, because we talk a lot about like, oh, this is being presented in front of like a traditional white theater audience. But like, what are the ways in which like the Southern storytelling that influenced this play also like reads to white audiences in your perspective, or yeah, what that came out of?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so interesting to answer these questions because I do not, and forgive me, but I don't imagine white audiences when I write. Okay, so that like I don't say how, I don't ask myself how might white audiences respond before I write. I just imagine I have a very narrow audience, which is my family. I think like, will my mama like this? Will my sister laugh at this? Will my dad get this? And we kind of nudge each other, because what that does is sets the play in a kind of specificity that becomes unapologetic. That makes sense? Oh, am I stuck? Yeah.
Yeah,
It becomes unapologetic, and so I don't have to. Uh-oh, am I okay?
Yep, you're okay.
Okay. So when I add that level of specificity to it, I just write freely. Now, I don't consider how it would be measured uh, otherwise. So, but in performance, I think there are certain assumptions about Southern stories and Black Southern stories, we tend to um, make them rather romantic. And I think there's really something about me placing this Southern storyteller as an everyman that says, okay, this is a uh, person whose life is worth considering in even though it's told in a very specific kind of Southern uh, fable like way, but there's something really concrete to it as well, um, that that says you have to consider this body that you might think is I don't know, doing is magical in a way, but there's actual stakes in it for you that kind of makes it a little bit more concrete.
Well, and that's to me watching Tracy, and I can only imagine what it would have been like as well with you, Donnetta, or another actor, watching basically the theater laid bare so that it really is, it's in the hands of an artist to craft pretty much everything, do the whole storytelling. There's not a lot of huge technical bells and whistles.
Yeah.
And can you speak to that, how that works, how that connects us? What is important to you about that form of storytelling?
I think it is all of the things of tearing down the distance, you know, and that is no knock on design as I speak to a designer, um, but just to say, how close can I get to the people I'm trying to be in communion with? How tactile, how tactile can it be? And for me, it means we are going to just start a conversation as we would. We are going to start singing together. We are going to have this have this have this have this conversation here in real time. I think for me, you know, there is what you were talking about at the beginning. There's oftentimes this thing of, okay, I've received the play, now I can go about my business, and I came to get entertained. And now, not to say that the play isn't entertaining, I think it's terribly entertaining. But I want people to feel like, oh, there is change happening now. And for me, that happens when I'm able to press the flesh, as they say, and that comes with being bare and raw, and a kind of vulnerability for a performer. Because I know that it was really scary when I was doing it. I can't imagine what Tracy was going through too, or at least I can, I guess. Um, uh, you know, how naked can you be? And for me, that's the cost of, or that's the transaction. If I'm vulnerable, then the audience can be too. They can trust that we're going on this journey together, and you don't get to hide behind anything, you know.
So somebody in the chat is saying they were confused a little bit about and what they saw, and finally decided that it was a struggle between God and the devil. And speak to, you know, what are you trying to get at with what is your objective with this play, Donnetta? Or is there a perspective that you would like people to get out of this play?
Is there a well, my main objective is for people to consider the space around them. I and the people around them. It's like maybe you won't pass someone by, like you will see them. Um, it's interesting. We had a during the WP production, we had a cohort of 5 young women for whom the play read very differently. Um, you know, what does materialism mean to young people versus like what might gentrification mean to to other folks versus what might somebody said something about like that one family member who thinks they're on the come up. So for me, it really is about those questions of who are we to each other, what are we willing to sacrifice for each other, what does community mean, are we worth it to keep it together, um, are we the kind of community that sacrifices the lowest among us to call that prosperity? What is justice? What is grace? I have more questions than anything, and I think um, for me it is about asking those questions. Um, my wife came and saw the play I think 6 times, and she was like, it's my favorite play of hers I think. Um, but she was like every time she saw it, it's like peeling back an onion, you know.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Donnetta, that every time I see it from a slightly different perspective. So one minute it may be the God and devil, and another minute it's about something. It's about what matters in a town, and then it's about history, and then it's about climate change. I mean, it's sort of
Mm.
it's any of those questions that are sort of these huge questions that um, are not answerable by any of us. In there isn't one answer. There's a myriad of answers that are there. Sort of the air and the
Mhm.
water to me is where climate change comes into the whole picture.
Mm.
Um, so it is a play that both is open, but also it's a little scary because there isn't it's not this is what all of this means.
Mhm.
Um, so in the Q&A, Rob mentioned, you said that the audience consisting of homeless people reacted a bit differently. Can you sort of elaborate on what the differences are in your view, and
Mhm.
what you attribute that to, if that's possible to say?
To that
a
understand.
different a different response to what people are seeing on stage, that they might have responded differently.
Yeah, I think it's being from that position of not of being the one to have to come to the town, of being the one for whom this space isn't traditionally for. You know, it was something for them to have been invited to the space, right? Because it is usually closed off. That's over there, we're over here. What do any of those two things have to do with each other? Um, and they were talking about systems in a different way. Uh, they were talking about being the ones being passed by, um, and understanding their understanding of. Well, I don't want to give it. I don't want to give too much away, but their understanding of those notions of justice were were uh, were interesting, illuminating, um, surprising. Yeah, I think we had a conversation that was about 2.5. We had to get everybody out of it. We stayed so long and had such a meaningful conversation with them, um, just from the perspective of like this is unusual, and it's unusual to see someone like this on stage.
Well, and I would say that I've certainly been hearing from audience members who have come to see the play, and I think have similar questions or have different responses to it, and are a big part. And this is, plug your ears for a minute if you haven't seen it, but a big part of the biggest question is about around the vote, is around what does it mean to sort of have to have to choose yes or no.
Yeah. Yeah. And that it is a human being who you've just gone through a thing with, right? And it's not just their experience, it's ours. That's, I think, is the one of the kind of gifts of it, is that the man isn't going through it alone. We're all in it together, you know. So it's really understanding who you are as an individual in the audience, of like where you actually stand inside of this community. You're part of the what if, and that what if kind of translates to exactly where we are, because this isn't an unfamiliar place when you think about it. It's not an unfamiliar place. There are people on peripheries, and there are people who have been sacrificed to the betterment, however you want to articulate that, of the community, for better or worse. You know, what is the shiny thing that we are chasing, um, that may cost us a little bit of what it means to be human. You know, but do communities evolve anyway, right? You know, so it's like, what are you giving up, and and there's also, you know, a moment of recognition of the things that were there. When you talk about history, what is worth keeping? What is of value? What do we value as a community? I think is a big question.
Good. I'm going to switch us to a totally different gear. Todd says, Donnetta, I love the lyrical quality of the piece. Can you talk a little bit about writing in verse?
Yeah. What do you want to know? It's
Well,
tricky.
is that is it natural for you to sort of do that, or was that work?
Yeah, I think Macy and I had this conversation. I've written poetry a lot longer than I've written plays, and I've written some really, really, really bad poetry. And in the beginning, I've written some really bad plays, but they all came together in this one. You know, like I said, I wanted to keep the language heightened for the audiences that I was serving. Uh, but honestly, this was such a pleasure write for me. Um, it- I love music. I'm like the OJs. I love music, any kind of music, just so long as it's grooving, as they say. And for me, I hear rhythm, and for me, the entire piece is a song, right, with breaks, and it's like jazz and like um, blues and gospel and all of that. But to me, it's like the music and the language is in communion with each other. So the language picks up where the music drops, and the language picks up where the music drops. So it's supposed to be like one really long song. So it felt like making music to me, and it was and it and I you know, I think about right when I was writing it, it just felt good and pleasurable to kind of like try and find like how do I tell the story specifically, but then make it put it in these couplets or what have you, you know.
So, and how did you know where it needed a song? How did you know where that it needed to just sort of add that level of sort of theatricality to
Yeah.
with that?
Now that I have no idea. I really don't. I'm I should never teach a playwriting class, I'll tell you that, because I don't write outlines, and I don't like to know what's going to happen. I think for me, I wrote I started to, you know, started from the beginning and started wrote this thing, and then I got to the point where there had to be this conversation of an ask, and I said, and then I just kind of dropped into a song there. I guess I kind of write from a space of why not. And so I think once I got the first song, I was like, oh well, I'm gonna need some more music, and wound up writing like 8 songs. So I guess the first song begot the second, begot the third, and it sort of mapped itself out structurally a little bit better during workshops and things like that. But it all I know is that it felt good in the beginning, and then after that, I was like, okay, now we got to work and like create structure around it.
Well, and was your perspective that of the man, or were you the omniscient person, or like what happened when we get to other characters? Like, where is it all coming from for you?
Like, you talking about intention when I write? Or
Yeah, or just because you said you get into it and you go with the flow. Are you getting into it as Donnetta outside of it, or is Donnetta asking the characters questions or listening to the characters, or is Donnetta entering the characters the way that I'm not an actor, so I'm going to make a big brash assumption that an actor tries to sort of like get inside of a character and live in that world.
yeah, I would say all of those things are correct. All of those things are correct, right? I think because I am an actor, I'm thinking about what feels delicious to say on a very superficial level. I'm like, what is delicious to say? What is tricky to say? What pops in the mouth and in the body? And like, oh my God, is this even possible? Like, what's the impossible thing? Let's do that. Like, that's the fun part for me. Like, oh, this seems like they'll never work. We should totally write that. We, meaning all of the perspectives in my head. And then and I think I have to kind of rotate that lens when I'm writing from the perspective of man, or the other man, or the town, and like what do they feel about the thing, and like so for me it is dropping into each of those individual characters, like, and you ask the same things, like I think when I began playwriting, what was so wonderful to realize is that we actually ask the same question of actors as we do of writers. Like, what do they want? Why are they here? Why is this day different than any other day? All of that stuff, you know. But the trick of the writing is like putting it in the language, right? But it's the same kind of question. So I had that training of sitting inside of character and switching lens, switching lens, switching lens. Not to say that it was easy, but that there's a certain instinct for it that felt good. I think that's why it was pleasurable to write, because I got to be a little insane.
So, and you write, your characters are really, they are just wonderful. And somebody starts speaking and you know who this person is. You understand this person. And so where do you get where did you get all these multiple characters from that embody this, that are in this piece?
I don't know. Like I said, I grew up in South Carolina, and I've been around some folks. You know what I mean? I've been around some peoples, and I think just being a quiet kid who observes the world, and I think I just for as introverted as I am, I do kind of like people, and I'm kind of curious about them, and and I get excited when I get to place those people I'm interested in and curious about uh, on stage. It's like y'all ain't seen nothing like this yet. Watch out. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this. It's like I know these people. These people from around the way. Like watch out. So I don't know. I think it's a matter of keeping ye old eyes open, and again, that thing about music. It's like hearing the music of how people speak. I think that's something that I latched onto as a performer. I think so. But I mean, everything turns into music for me anyway.
So I'm going to sort of take that idea of music and hearing things, and how it should feel, and then now that's an actor. An actor knows that
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know that as an actor really, really well. So what is it like for you as a writer, who's also an actor, to now have your words in somebody else's mouth, probably not with the same, it's going to be different. They're going to find a different way to move through that language. And how
Yeah.
does it feel when you're watching somebody else take your language that sort of springs up? Because I think, you know, there's a certain amount of, um, um, you are a playwright, but you also are approaching it as an actor.
Yeah, for me, it's imperative that it gets out of my body. When I was working workshopping it, I've always had other people do it. It doesn't work if only I can do it. It's for me, like, that's not a play. That's not particularly successful. That is a showcase piece, you know, and I don't need to be, that doesn't need to be, you know, not to, I feel like such a jerk now. But for me, uh, if this is a thing that has a mission of going into community and saying, build this thing in your image, it cannot stay with me. That would probably be the least successful thing. It's like, oh, will you come in here and tell us how our community works? No, that's not what it's supposed to be. And also, I hadn't even had it in my mind to perform it. I'd written it with another actor in mind. So it's always been just a bit outside of my body. I think the reason why I ended up performing it along with David Ryan Smith, but the reason why I ended up performing it is um, because I did have a shorthand with the language, um, and I knew that I wanted to do something kind of tricky with it, and I had to be able to articulate that enough to put it on paper. But for me, it's thrilling to see it in other people's bodies and other people's mouths, and to see them move and work with the language and work with with people, being in communion with them. That to me is the measure of success, is when it's outside of my body and like, take it, run, run, run. Yeah.
I'd love to go back to one of the ideas in the play, and I'm going to share what this is, because I think as people watching it now on the video thing, you won't have this experience anyway. But at the end, there isn't an opportunity for the audience to just say, "Wow, that was great." And can you speak to that choice and why that was important for you to just have it be, we've done what we do at the end, and now we're done and we're moving on?
Yeah. Well, again, it's disrupting the what we're used to, right? I think for me, the show continues after. Um, it's another point of distance. You know, it's like, great relief. We've actually didn't really
Got it.
have to participate in a thing. It's now the thing that we're used to. Thank goodness. No, what I'm hoping for is there's a decision has been made, and then we have to live with it. You know, we have to live with it. Um, you know, which is not to say you cannot send cards and flowers to your lovely actor. Uh, there's also cash apps. It is it it does it is another way of making sure that this distance isn't, you know, there's no fallacy in it. That's I'm trying to like extract as much as possible. Yeah.
Great. And I know that Dina in the chat asked a question about, or Dibby asked a question about the vote that we just mentioned. And if you have questions about it, I prefer that you actually email somebody at the theater. You can email me or the box office, and we will share the stats with you. But I don't want to do that right now, right here, until people have had a chance to see things. Um, Dibby is saying that it was a fantastic piece of acting that we saw, and I went today and saw Tracy's final in-person performance, and part of me wishes we had the capacity to video that, because she's grown so much, she's mined so much, and I think this speaks to just the depth of Donnetta's writing, is that there is so much there, and she's so much more comfortable with the language, that it was really a joy to see that. And so she's made real progress. And I guess my final question to Donnetta is really, when is progress progress, and what do you think progress looks like?
Progress in general, or you framed it with with Tracy's growth in the piece. Do you?
No, I think in general. I think I'm just trying to segue us into what is progress.
I would say when listening becomes understanding, understanding becomes action. Because we're going through a moment now where the thing to say is, especially after this year that we've had, that has been so revealing. Um, you know, uh, where I've seen people, institutions, individuals say, "Well, I'm listening and I'm learning. I'm listening and I'm learning." Um, okay, to what end? What do you do with what you've heard? What do you do with what you've learned? How do you articulate that into the depths of yourself, self, so that you know, people can see the truth of who you are, right? Um, and that the action is concrete, and that we I think the understanding is that we are people who are supposed to grow. We're people who are supposed to evolve and change and be with each other, and try to understand what the best of us looks like together. So you do the listening, you do the educating, and then you do the action of loving and being. And that's hard. I think people think that that is going to be easy. It's like, oh, great. It means like not having conflict, not doing the hard work, not talking about the truth of an ugly matter, all of that stuff. No, that means you've done all of that digging around in the muck, learn some hard truths about yourself, maybe. It's like nobody likes to be wrong, everybody likes to be good. But that gets you to the other side of something much bigger. And I think once we get uncomfortable with the listening and educating and get into the uncomfortable doing and failing in the doing, getting it wrong the first time, the second time, the third time, go, now I got it. I think that's progress.
Macy, do you have anything else you want to add here?
Um, I think, Donnetta, you said it really well, that I feel like progress really comes about when we are looking into ourselves and looking at the ways we can better ourselves, and then using that information to then better our communities, and like realizing that it is really all about community, which I think is what this piece really speaks to, at least for me. Yeah.
So I think we're going to close it out here. Donnetta Lavinia Grays, thank you so much for taking time out of, I know you're on a retreat trying to get a lot of commissions written, so we so appreciate your taking time to join us and share your thoughts about where we stand. Thank you for letting us produce it here at Portland Stage. And I look forward to a day when Donnetta Lavinia Grays can be back in Portland live and in person, and hopefully without a mask on.
Right, that's right. Can I just say thank you again? It means so much to me that this particular play is up there. And, I have such an affection for the community up there who's embraced me at least twice before. So so it's a real honor to kind of be back in the community in this way. So thank you very, very much.
Wonderful. We're looking forward to more. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next season, hopefully back live and in person.